What would have to change for you to favor independence and take up arms?
If every other action left to us failed, and so far, sir, all we've done is limited agreements of non-importation. There's a lot of actions left to us, sir.
With the late war with France, would you think importing anything from France would be beneficial to the colonies if it was
not at all, sir? It's a violation of the law, particularly France. Yeah. We're not allowed to trade with any foreign nation as far as purchasing goes, and most of our selling we can't sell to foreign powers. There's some exceptions. For instance, I'm engaged in the production of wheat. That's one of the reasons I grow wheat, is it's not enumerated in the Navigation Act. So I can sell my wheat almost anywhere in the world. But guess where the one place I can't sell it is?
France.
France is our natural enemy. We've never been allowed to trade with France. The question is regarding the unfortunate circumstance that occurred in Boston back in '69, where a mob threatened the safety of some soldiers and fired into the crowd. I mentioned that the port of Boston is being closed. We have reason to believe that that's not going to be the end of this. There's a number of actions that are being debated within the Parliament in Westminster, other punishments. And there are men in the Parliament who are of the opinion that if these men who destroyed the tea are taken up, that they cannot be tried in Boston. The argument is made by some members of the administration that a fair trial cannot be had in Boston. But is that true? The soldiers who were involved in the incident that that gentleman speaks of, where were they tried, do you recall?
Boston.
They were tried in Boston. They were in fact defended by a Boston man. Well, I understand he's actually from just outside of Boston. Born and raised, Mr. Adams, John Adams, not Samuel Adams. And what was the result of that trial?
Not guilty.
All of them but one were acquitted. And the one that was found guilty not of the original charge of murder, but of the lesser charge of manslaughter, which is very fitting, because the gentleman in question was the commanding officer. So it's fitting that he take the punishment for having lost control of his men, but in an action that, frankly, one should expect. It's not a bright idea to attack soldiers armed with muskets when you're armed only with brickbats. Those men were acquitted. Justice was had. Those men obviously had a fair trial. And where did they have it? Not in Nova Scotia, not here in Williamsburg, not in London, which is where they would have to be tried if they're tried by Admiralty Court, but rather in Boston herself. I have no doubts at all that if these men responsible for the tea are brought up, that a fair trial could be had in Boston. But a fair trial certainly could not be had elsewhere. Because how are those men to provide for their witnesses if they're tried in London?
Should men take up arms right now?
No. Not at all, sir. What for? Unless you mean to pacify the Shawnee. In that case, yes, we certainly should. Let me come to you, man. What was your question? The question is, how many people are of the opinion that we should not import goods, or that we shouldn't stop importing goods? We haven't entered into an agreement yet now, but I can't imagine that there are any who don't believe that we shouldn't stop some importation. That's not the question. The question is, what should we stop? What was I asking you to stop importing?
Luxury.
Is that what I asked?
All goods.
Everything. The reason that you're thinking luxury is because we can provide most of the necessities of life ourselves. We don't need to import those. So luxuries are what we have to do without. But I'm asking you not to import anything. Many men won't go that far. There are many men who think that we should do nothing more than stop the imports of the East India Company, because that's the company whose tea was destroyed that's caused these coercive acts to be placed in Massachusetts. My reason to stand against that is we have entered into limited agreements. And they have given us success, but it has only been limited success. So I'm not in favor of stopping imports only of the East India Company. I'm not in favor of stopping only luxury imports. I'm not in favor of stopping imports with some exceptions, which is another opinion that some men have. That we should make some exceptions for various things. If we do so, where do these exceptions begin and end? How much easier is it to just stop all imports? There are men, however, that will go farther than me. There are men who are of the opinion that we should not only stop our imports immediately, but we should immediately stop all of our exports, which is why I mentioned that earlier. We might need in the future to stop our exports, but this isn't the time for it. And there's even at least one man who believes we should not only stop imports and exports, but we should also violate the Navigation Acts that I've mentioned. And that is a violation of law passed by our own representatives. If we are crying out against injustice in others, we must remain just ourselves. And how can we be just if we're violating our own law? Now, only the very last of circumstances can justify such actions as that.